Good to be here with y'all. We're going to do something for the first time this evening that we want to do a lot of times. We're going to talk live with a caller so that we get to talk back and forth, as opposed to you're listening to my monologues when I'm often guessing at what the reader meant or trying to fill in the blanks. So, boom. Sheridan.
Yes.
We were going to, let's talk about your email. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You said that you've been feeling anxious and confused because your husband is really unhappy about the divorce. I can't remember. Are you divorced or you're about to be?
I'm in the process of filing.
Got it. And you said, I feel guilty about causing him pain. How do I know if it's the right thing to do if it causes him so much pain? He said that he doesn't have it in him to try again. I've done everything I know how to improve the marriage, so what do I do now? So it's actually a really short list of questions. Are you unhappy in your marriage?
Yes.
I would say that's pretty obvious since, you're filing. But more important is living with him, being with him in a partnership, or at least nominally a partnership, is it crushing? Not just difficult, but it's just actually sapping the energy out of you.
I think that my friends would say it probably is. I have structured my life, we live separately, and I've structured my life to have such a full life. And we have such a narrow slice that we're together now. It's just that we visit periodically at my condo and watch maybe some TV. So, so to answer your question, I'd say what feels most out of alignment for me is that it isn't a full marriage, or isn't even close to a full marriage. So that doesn't feel right to me to keep calling it a marriage.
Has it ever been a full marriage?
I don't know what I don't know. I'm somewhat new to real love. I think that we both gave it a try. We were both single for a really long time, the first marriage in our 40s. I'm not, I guess I feel like we gave it a fair amount, and we were almost more like two singles living together.
Sure. So no, it really hasn't been a full marriage. If he had to move back in with you and live with you full time right now, would you find that to be fairly intolerable?
Well, yeah. To be clear, he wouldn't move into my condo. I would have to move to his house, and I couldn't bring any of my furniture. And I know that's not the real issue, but he's fairly rigid and not very willing to make many changes, and I think they're just so uncomfortable for him. So it just, I can't imagine myself doing that.
Okay, well, you're pretty much answering the important questions. You already said that he doesn't have it in him to try again, and actually he didn't really try effectively the first time. And I'm not implying that he could have, just that he didn't.
Yeah.
So it's really unlikely from what you say that he's going to make any dramatic change in his life.
No, absolutely, I agree with you.
So those are really the important questions. I think you are willing to make dramatic changes in your life, and it sounds very much like if you did, you would have to demonstrate that to him for years before it would make any difference to him, if ever.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. And he says just enough things to validate that that very point. So I feel blessed when I get that kind of clarity that just comes out. It feels like a little bit of a wake-up call. Like, boy, I was really glad when you moved out, Sheridan, because now I'm so glad I didn't have to get rid of any of my furniture when you lived here.
Oh, well, hon.
It's just that he's really loving love the furniture, you know. I mean, it is what it is. But,
and it's not a criticism of him, honey, but when he says, you know, I'm glad you moved out so I could save my furniture, that's, you know, pretty much the kiss of death. You know that, right?
yeah.
And so when you say, well, you know, I'm a little uncertain about this because I'm causing him pain. Listen really closely, dear. You aren't causing him any pain at all. He arrived at your marriage with all the pain. So in the short term, your divorcing him might cause him a little discomfort, but forgive me, he still has the furniture.
Yeah. It's a very good point.
Which is, after all, the important thing, right? So at the last weekend, what did you learn?
Well, I mean, many things. But this is very relevant to this conversation because I think my sort of bottom moment was when I realized that all my life I've been feeling like it was my job to get people to love me. And when I admitted that, and you called me on it, I just, something broke and opened in me at the same time, which is, that's an impossible game, and I give up, and I don't know what this is going to look like from here, but this idea that I could be loved without having to do that is both daunting and wonderful.
Yes. What you did while you were here was nothing short of miraculous. You decided to trust. You decided to give up a lifetime of beliefs to quit believing that pile of manure that you have to work to feel loved. And you allowed yourself to be loved while you did nothing. In fact, while you disclosed things that many people would call, unattractive, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, way to go, honey. You really do deserve to be with somebody who can be a real partner. And in his defense, before now, you didn't know what being a real partner was either. So, what a glorious, spectacular future you have ahead of you. And yes, it is daunting, but only because it's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for taking the time to share all this with us. And I'm sure you and I will be speaking more than once.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, honey.
Good night.
That's a beautiful example of somebody who did absolutely the very best that she could, and yet the relationship still failed because both she and her partner didn't even come close to having what they needed to have a successful relationship. But they tried. You heard her say, we really tried. We both gave it all we had, which was almost nothing. I mean, his most valiant effort was to put up with the fact that she was occupying space that could have been occupied by perhaps a table or a chair. And now that she's gone, oh, thank goodness, he has all the furniture still in the same place, and he didn't really even have to rearrange it. That's pretty stuck. And although that sounds ridiculous that he would value the furniture over her, in every relationship, that's exactly what we do. We value something over love. We value money, we value fame, power, praise, sex, something. And we don't put our partner first, so we lose. So his example looks, a little ridiculous at being furniture, but the rest of us aren't doing a whole lot better. So when I laugh at that, be clear that I'm laughing at all of us, including me. I've done it on many occasions. Put whatever in front of loving, being right, feeling powerful, covering up my fears, whatever. It's all death. Here's a member who says, I really like that. Enjoyed the live conversation. You'll have to let me know about how the volume was and what they thought. We'll see. This member says, I'm just learning about real love. Read a book, attended a seminar, book study group. I'm so happy to learn that this fear, anger, and all my other stupid behaviors and the huge void that I feel sometimes is simply not feeling loved. It's not complicated. And when I don't feel loved, it's impossible to give it. What a relief, which is really much the relief that Sheridan was talking about, our live guest. When she finally realized that she's been spending her whole life trying to get people to like her, and that if they didn't, it was her fault. Well, how confusing and horrifying is that? Now she knows that's not true. You continue. I've also been in 12-step meetings for 35 plus years. In the meetings, we told the truth, sort of, but we left out the negative stuff about the rest of our lives. All we talked about was the addictions. We didn't talk about our fears and failings and selfishness and all that stuff. So I learned to be a master pretender. I could talk a good game, pretended like I had it together much of the time, and eventually I just, because it wasn't real, I descended into a dark, lonely, scary place prior to real love. So these are very smart observations that you make about the 12-step process. In meetings, you tell the truth, but in the first place, you tell it from your perspective. And if we're lost and confused and miserable and in pain, how could we possibly tell the whole truth? It's very limited. We stand up and we say, I'm Greg, I'm a drug addict. Well, it's almost worthless. I'm not a drug addict. That's not my title. It's not my last name. It's what I do in response to pain. And pretty much not a soul in that room understands that it's simply a response to pain. They think it's a disease. So you tell the truth from your own perspective, you tell it your way, and nobody in the room is even permitted to comment, correct, guide, teach, nothing. I just did a real love weekend. Did another one before that, so we did 2 in a row. And the people there really needed help telling the truth about themselves. It wasn't something that just came to them naturally. In fact, they would very sincerely talk about some of their fears, some of their superficial failures, but not the scary stuff. Not that got all the way down to the marrow of the bones, the stuff that would wake them up in the night with a sweat. I'm a completely selfish human being. I have absolutely no clue how to have a relationship, like our live caller said. I resist anybody who tells me what I don't want to hear. I've been in real love for 2 years and I'm still in the same place because when people get too close, I withdraw. I've never fully trusted anybody. Those are examples of scary truths. And they were not getting to these fears and their controlling and their anger, which is the stuff that kills us, without help. You continue. There's a big age difference between my partner and myself. I'm younger than she. We've been together almost 20 years. We get along and love each other the best we know how, but lately I've been a little concerned about the age difference. I think I'm worried about what other people think, which of course has been a problem all my life. Also, my partner is not doing real love with me. I gave her the book, practically read it to her while I was reading. Of course, we get angry at each other sometimes. She does have this amazing ability to let things go quickly. Anyway, I'm going to lead the way in real love, see what I can bring to the table, and maybe be an example of learning how to receive and give real love. So first, let's deal with the age difference. It means nothing. Nothing at all. Irrelevant. Unless you're 45 and she's 6 or the other way around, it just doesn't matter. If you care about age, as you say, you're thinking about what other people think of you, and that can be crippling. That's a problem. If you need approval, there's no way you could be loving your partner enough unconditionally because you'll do it with her too. So you're not getting enough love in your life. What matters is the love you find and the love you share in your relationship. It has nothing to do with age. Second, the effect of her not doing real love. Well, depends. The real point is not her. It's whether you are willing to find, trust, and share real love. Until you do, you have no idea whether your relationship can succeed. Somebody has to lead. A lady just the other day said, well, I'm done. I'm out of this relationship, because she'd been doing real love for all of 3 weeks. Her husband had doing it for all of 4 days. She'd been doing it just long enough to realize that there was no unconditional love in their relationship. So her solution? dump the relationship of 30 years. No, wrong. You don't know anything about what's possible till you become loving. As you said, we get along. Oh, that's a terrible phrase. When I ask people how their relationship is, and they say, well, we get along pretty well. Oh, that's a kiss of death. I'd much rather have people say, we hate each other. We're both having affairs. We throw things at each other. At least they know something's wrong. They need help. We're doing okay. You can coast along doing okay and getting along forever, but you don't really have a partnership. I get along with all the trees in my backyard, but we don't really have a partnership. So let's say that you do this, that you find and trust and share real love, and she doesn't. But as you say, she lets go of problems quickly. That might be enough. It's all about whether two people can be kind with each other, supportive, gentle, caring, whether they both study the words of real love or the principles or a program. Doesn't matter so much. I have 7 children, and there's really only 2 of them that like actively read the real love books, but the rest of them live them. They live the principles. They're happy, they're kind, they're gentle, caring. So I don't care whether they read the books. If you really become loving, though, it's pretty likely that she'll respond. People adore being loved if it's unconditional. But she may not respond a lot. I know many people where one partner is actively involved in real love and loving, and the other just, frankly, receives the benefit. They feel loved, they feel grateful, they feel calm, and that's pretty good. I know one lady whose husband has done pretty much nothing in real love, and she's been doing it for 12 years or something. They have a pretty good relationship because she's loving to him. He likes it. He's sometimes loving back, but not nearly as often as she, but she enjoys loving him. You have to decide what you need. And some people don't respond at all. She might become more distant and more unloving as the two of you kind of diverge in your journeys. But don't worry about that now. You can decide when that happens. So in the short term, you don't need to remember a lot. Just learn what you can. Get love from people who have it, and then pour it all over her head. And wait and see. Just observe. Here's a member who says, children are considered to know right from wrong enough at age 14. Or at least in California, that's the age where they can be arrested. When we let the government decide when and children are or are not ready to lie or love, that's just awful. The courts there quiz children as to whether they know the difference between a lie and the truth and right from wrong before they can testify in a court of law. But of course, my question would be, if the child is lying, how would they know? Are there different ages where children understand different things, like consequences, right from wrong, and all the other teachings as far as real love is concerned? Yeah, children mature in their ability to understand emotions, feelings, right and wrong, just as they differ in their ability to do math or music or whatever. But one thing we do know, and that is that children understand right and wrong and lying, things like lying, at a far earlier age than we might have supposed before. They used to say that children didn't really quite understand lying until they were 4, 5, 6 years old. Oh, they've done studies now that show that children understand lying or faking as early as 6 months. They observe children by camera in their cribs, and they're lying there playing with their little toes, and then they decide they want to get somebody's attention, so they look around and they see if there's an adult, and then they just fake crying. It's really obvious because it's not like their other cries. They cry, and they wait for a little bit, look around. It's 6 months, and see if somebody comes, and they cry a little bit more. It's really cute. So we learn how to lie at a pretty early age. At what age do they understand consequences and the other things? You really can't tell except by watching them. So you apply a consequence to a child. My kids have started applying consequences to their kids as early as 11 months, like cleaning up their messes after they make them. The kids understand perfectly consequences. My daughter had a 11-month-old child, and she said he keeps knocking things off that little tray that they serve food on. She said, before I kill him, do you have any suggestions? And so I gave her some, and she went back and he knocked everything off the tray and all over the floor. And she just took the tray off gently and helped him down out of his chair and went over to the sink and got on a stool and got a cloth wet, came down, helped him wipe up all the food, which of course helping an 11-month-old wipe up the food takes all day. Puts him back in his chair, puts the food on there. He knocked it all off on the floor again. They went through the same long process. She put him back up in the chair, put the food on the tray, and he took his arm out to knock the food off. And she said he looked up. NLP people will tell you, they look up into, I don't remember which direction, when they're thinking. And he was thinking, almost stroking his chin, going, do I really want to clean up the mess again? And at 11 months, went, nah, and ate his lunch. So there's at least one kid. He's not, I don't think, an unusual child as far as perception. He figured it out at 11 months. So you try it, and that's how you know what they understand. Pretty easy. Woman, Sally, wrote describing her relationship with her father. She said he was, well, all of her life. She's in her 40s. Distant, cold, and to this day still never initiates contact with her, doesn't touch her, doesn't show any interest in her. And then the other day he wrote her saying that he met a woman at a social function who said some nice things about her, his daughter, and he wanted to share them with her, which of course he did, in writing. Couldn't call her. The lady had said that Sally was well-spoken and played tennis well. And he said that he wished he could do something to help her get on with her life. So, is everybody listening, seeing the messages in this? He's a cold man. I don't love you. He doesn't make contact with her. I don't love you. He writes to say that someone else said something nice about her. Translation, I finally found evidence that you might be worth something. And what did the woman say? That she spoke well and played tennis well. Yuck. The only things that he could find to say good are worthless. You can train a monkey virtually to play tennis up to a certain level. You can get a computer to be articulate. And then he adds, after really very superficial compliments, that he wishes he could help her get on with her life, which means very clearly, you're worthless. Why can't you do something that would make me value you? Yuck. I mean, that's just horrifying, which of course I told her. And she responded, I didn't see all that. I've always felt distant from him, even angry at him, but I didn't quite understand why. Now she does. She said, I have a question. I have two brothers. They didn't feel distant from him. Why is that? That's easy. They don't feel his disapproval because they trade in the currency he values. They make him look good in a way that he likes. They are very educated. They're financially successful. They have children, especially male children, whatever. So he likes them better because they know what he likes. They trade with him. You don't have the currency that he enjoys. You don't have the shiny professional job that everybody immediately understands, like your brother, if I remember, one's a doctor, one's a lawyer. I mean, how cliche, huh? So that he can go around talking about, my son the doctor, as though that were his son's name, not my son John, my son the doctor, my son the lawyer, because it makes him look good. He doesn't quite know what to do with you, though. My daughter, who works in the Office of Economic planning for the government of whatever, writing grant proposals. Who's going to even understand this? Nobody will. So he has no idea how to value you as a person. Forget that you've become happier or more loving, or those don't have numbers attached to them, whereas dollars do. Billable hours do. Number of children do. You can number these things. Now, why do they like him better? Because he taught them to live as he does, and they complied, so they all have a common currency with them. So they're comfortable with him too. Everybody likes each other because, well, frankly, it's easier. You watch somebody come into a room where everybody's speaking a foreign language, and they can hear the tones of somebody speaking their language. If you speak English and you walked into Afghanistan in a bar, you could hear somebody speaking English on the other side of the bar, because it has a certain cadence. It has certain little vowel usages and consonants that you just immediately hear. And you'd go over to talk to that person because you have a common currency, even if that person's a drug dealer, gun runner, and murderer. And that's the kind of relationship, not that they're gun runners and murderers, that your dad has with your brothers. It's just trading. A husband and a wife that I know, the husband, Mark, has been hurt a lot in his life, which is not uncommon. Gee, who hasn't been? His reaction has been to go into his head. So he intellectualizes stuff, doesn't express feelings much, although he has them, but the feelings are stuffed way down, and he continues to stuff them down by thinking. His wife, Mary, also hurt. Different ways, but pain is pain. But her reaction is different. She has reacted by being much more expressive, very victim-y, angry. But now she's learning how to do this differently. Is one worse than the other? Meaningless question. They're just reactions to pain. Pain is pain. We tend to condemn the people who react to pain differently from us, especially if their behavior affects us. But pain is pain. You back up and your arm touches a hot stove. Automatically, no thinking, you will jerk your arm away. If you're left-handed, you will tend to jerk your arm in one direction. If you're right-handed, in the other, which is better? Does it matter? Same here. Now, he's more intellectual, so he tends to meditate. Meditates hours a day. That could look all New Agey and Near Eastern mystical, and there's some of that in there, but it's also a way to escape feeling, because the entire process happens in your head, and you can create whatever you want in a meditation, your own world, just like playing a video game. He found a particular kind of guided meditation where a young lady speaks gently, taking you to a place of relaxation. But it's not just meditative. Her voice is, because I watched the meditation, or heard it, both, it's distinctly seductive. There's no mistaking it. She's seducing the listener, and not so subtly sexual. Definite, no doubt about it, not just an interpretation. It's a kind of meditation porn. Really? I'd never seen such a thing. Well, now I have. And I listen to it all day long. No, I don't. But it's very clever. It's porn, but not quite. And so it's cloaked in the ancient traditions of meditation. Smart. He didn't hide it. Not ashamed of it. In fact, he showed it to her and asked her to listen to it. She did. Then he asked her to make a recording like it. Now, that could look like a positive thing. So I'd rather hear your voice than this woman's. But see, now he can have intimacy, possibly even a kind of mental sex with his own wife, but not have to get out of his own head. It's very clever, but it keeps him alone, you see? She resented it. They wanted to talk to me, and in years past, this would have been a fight. I mean, no kidding. Just guns and knives. She declares, "You're using me," to him. So what does he do? poof, withdraws. She gets angry, and then what does he do? He pulls away further into his head. So see where this goes? Same old pattern, and they're continents apart. So I suggested, this really isn't all that complicated. It's all about loving. It's always about paying attention to our partner. So I said, Mary, honey, you hate being controlled. Makes you crazy. Mark, you hate being told that you're wrong, because your world is in your head. And if your intellectual world is wrong, well then what do you got? You're worthless. So you run. So it could look like you're doomed. So how can everybody get what they want? The real message here from Mark isn't, would you make me a meditation porn? No. The real message is, please love me. That's what he's saying. And he came right out and asked her to do something so that he could feel more intimate with her. He just didn't know how to ask it. So Mary has a chance here to simply offer love. So Mary, make a more conscious effort to be tender. Whisper to him or be gentle with him in your way, not the way of the meditation. Voluntarily give instead of being controlled. And Mark, for your part, be grateful for her giving instead of wishing, well, why didn't you make me one of those? No. Let go, and as she loves you, be present. They both just melted. It was delightful. It was a spectacular example of not just resolving a conflict, poof, eliminating it, and replacing it with the two of them working together to create intimacy. Resolving conflict's nothing. I mean, I can resolve conflict just by putting the two parties in separate jail cells. No, they did way better than that. It was just very cool. It was a nice example of loving. Every once in a while, actually regularly, I tell you little Sylvie stories. One of my grandchildren. Why Sylvie and not the others? Because her mother sends me stories. So Bruce, who's 2 years old, and Sylvie, who's 3. Or did she just turn 4?
Almost 3. Just turned 4.
She just turned 4. She's going to be 3 for this story. They were standing in the doorway to the kitchen, and they were watching and talking to me as I made dinner. This is my daughter telling the story. Bruce, 2, snapped at Sylvie, "Don't touch me." It sounds like an angry, selfish thing. Little kids are just figuring out what they do and don't like. That's all. You put a food in their mouth that they don't like, and they haven't learned politically correct ways of saying it, socially acceptable ways. They just spit it out all over your face. Well, makes sense to them. Actually makes sense to me. When somebody's touching them and they don't like it, it just gets in their way, then they scream, "Don't touch me." They're not being brats. They're just learning how to express themselves. So this 2-year-old screams, "Don't touch me!" And Sylvie, who much more mature at 3, says, "Bruce, could you ask me with a different voice?" And then she modeled what it would look like by calmly saying, "Don't touch me." Bruce then says, "Yep, don't touch me." Sylvie says, "Okay, I won't." Bruce says, "Hanks," which means thanks. It's over. Whereas we adults, in fact entire countries, would argue about this for days, weeks, years. It's amazing to watch children who are raised unconditionally loved. Here's a member who, trying to remember the context. Actually, there's been a fair bit of Facebook discussion about this one, so most of you will know who it is. But she said, "I posted this on our forum earlier because I got the strongest sense that it's a real love dad we all need, more important than a real love mom." Now, that could be a potentially inflammatory concept, or at the very least confusing. But there's a lot of truth to that. Overall, the power of having a father does seem to be greater for most people, not everybody, than the power of having a mother. Studies have actually shown that the confidence of men, and especially women, interestingly, is more determined by the relationship with their father than their mother. Many women only feel complete when they have a dad. Now, they like having a mother, but there's something about having a dad. And nearly all men need a dad, and really they enjoy the support of their mother, but they don't describe it as indispensable. Now, why would that be? Because men are better than women? Obviously, no. No. It's likely due to the perception we have that men are somehow stronger. So therefore their love would be valued more. It's really that simple. Let me give you a couple of examples and see if it makes sense. You're a lamb in the wilderness. A lamb, like as in a little sheep. And you're surrounded by terror, night noises, wild animals. You're afraid. Another lamb walks up to you and nuzzles you. Well, that's good. You would like that. You would feel less alone, less afraid. But what if a tiger walked out of the jungle and came up and nuzzled you and stood between you and the danger? That would be like way better, wouldn't it? Like, wow, when you're afraid, do you want compassion or strength? Well, both, obviously. But if you had to choose one, when you're afraid, most of us would rather have strength. Second example. Suppose a small puppy walks up to you and licks your hand. It's cool. It's sweet. But then a lion walks out of the jungle, walks directly up to you and licks your hand. That is very cool. They'd make a movie out of that. Memorable. The combination of strength and love is disarming. Mothers are already known to be softer, kinder, more gentle, like a puppy. So if a mother gives you love, although it's good, no diminishing this at all, it's kind of like you expect that. Like you would expect from a puppy. But fathers are often like lions. So when they lick your hand, it's extra charming. Do people need a real love mother? Well, yeah. So is a mother less than a father? Depends entirely on the perception and trust of the child. Not innately so, no. Mothers or fathers are not better than one than the other. But many children and many adults who are still children snuggle with their mothers. But if there's danger, they run to their dads. But again, that's all in the perception of the child. Some children do go to their mothers in danger. So most children I know run to dad when they're afraid, which doesn't make one better than the other. It's a statement about the child. One woman in Real Love wrote this: I had an important realization this morning. I have attributed the concept and principles of real love with changing my life, and it has. But really, what's changed my life has been the knowledge that one person, in this case, my real love dad, loves me. No matter how I present, what mistakes I make, however stupid I'm being, I always feel cared for and not judged by him. That is what's changed my life. I've been loved by women, but somehow their love just didn't sink in as much. This is all about her. I didn't trust them to be strong enough, there's the word, strong, I'd forgotten about that, to be there for me completely. The love of a man was just more powerful. When I go into fear about anything, I contact him and he helps me to see clearly again. I could not have got this feeling, this progress, from simply reading a book or being around or calling a few people who may or may not be capable of loving me. I couldn't do it. Now, I do have some other people who I believe will do their best to love me, but it's not the same as having the love of someone who is effectively my dad. When I compare the love I get from my biological dad and my real love dad, the difference is huge. I need my real love daddy's love. And then she continues for a little bit, but she just makes in different ways the points that I've already been making. There's something about a father figure, no kidding, and studies have proven it. So does that mean, one lady actually asked, that real love coaches who are women are worthless? No. We really do need both. They both have really valuable qualities to offer. It would be infinitely preferable if you had both. So you experiment. Get a real love coach as a woman. See how far you get. If that doesn't work, then find a real love dad. There are some women who don't respond to the strength of men because they find it just too frightening. And so they do need a real love mother first. The only way you're going to figure this out is to experiment on your own. You're the deciding factor. Rita came to see me for a weekend, and I explained to Rita something that she had done that was selfish. I don't even remember what it was. She utterly denied what I explained. And I mean, like, no, I don't. I persisted until she at least appeared to understand. She did not like it. Later, she wrote, that's after she went home. She said, I don't need to be right here. Yeah, you really do. Remember, I know her. It's not conscious, but you respond automatically by being right almost every time. You really, really need to see that. It's a phenomenon that I call the dog and the piece of meat. You leave a piece of raw meat up on the kitchen counter. As you walk into the room, the dog is leaving the kitchen with the piece of meat in his mouth. Well, let's assume the dog can speak. What if the dog says, oh, I wasn't going to eat it, I was going to put it back in the fridge? No, he wasn't, because dogs eat meat. And when people have a profound need to be right, the odds that they would suddenly change that and not need to be, especially when something's being pointed out that they don't like, zero. She said, can you help me understand the difference between clarifying a misunderstanding and fighting to be right? She said, I know that being right is an issue for me. Master of the understatement. The difference between clarifying and fighting is you. Because you have a need to be right, you can assume that in any given situation you are being right. Really. Look at how vigorously you denied what I was telling you on the weekend. Then look at how long it took for you to realize what you were doing. Long in time, long in explanations. That's called being right. I've been a teacher pretty much all my life, no kidding. Taught medicine, taught science, taught lots of subjects. And when somebody's not trying to be right, it is astonishing how quickly they can receive new information. And they ask completely differently. So could you explain to me how I didn't understand that? That's how people ask when they don't need to be right. People who need to be right say, but I thought. That's not asking. You said, I'm working on learning how to be wrong. So I can't finish the sentence sometimes. I'm working on learning how to be wrong even when I'm partially right. You can't make this stuff up. People sometimes say to me, do you make up these conversations? Oh, no. In fact, I have to edit out the stuff you wouldn't believe that's true. That's just one of the hardest things for somebody that's right. You latch on to the partially right part because of fear. So you can't hear the part where you're wrong. It's so tempting. You could be 2% right and you would hang on to that. You'd say, well, now, theoretically, I could be right. Oh, my goodness. Why hang on to 2% right if you're 98% wrong? It'd be like you're sky jumping and you're headed toward the ground and you pass somebody who has no parachute. And you say, well, you're doing this wrong. And somebody who really enjoys latching onto the partially right part says, well, they told me to jump out of the door. Well, yeah, you got that part right, but then there was that whole, putting on the chute and latching it. We hang on to the partially right part, going all the way to the ground without a chute until we are splattered all over the road, honey. Being partially right just isn't worth it. You said it stems from a life of being made to feel wrong even when I did nothing wrong. Oh, I know that. We don't make up the behavior of being right. We're not trying to be difficult. It was painful to be wrong. So we learn to avoid the pain by being right. So it's natural to do it, and it's death. You said, I asked for your help because I thought it might matter to you to know that you misunderstood me. That's a really favorite thing for people to say who have a need to be right. Well, now see, you didn't know the whole story. And then they tell you the rest of the story and they're still just being right. It's latching onto that 5% right thing again. Let's assume, to those of you who are listening, now I'm talking to you instead of the person who wrote, let's assume that I did misunderstand some of what she said. Let's just assume that. I was wrong. I misunderstood it. It's still not the problem, because we're always, to some extent, misunderstood. Whoever understands us perfectly. But Rita didn't ask for understanding. She fights to be right. What's the difference? Attitude, not the words. Now, I can tell you some of the words that are different. People who are asking say, help me to understand. Yeah. But see, some of the more clever people who need to be right will use the same words. Now, I just need to understand, because they've learned that saying but identifies them. It unmasks them. So they're just more clever, but they're still being right. Understanding is emotionally neutral. Whoever in the middle of a physics lecture says to the teacher, now, can you help me see how that equation plays out? Can you show me some more permutations of that equation? Nobody ever stands up and goes, now, show me what that equation means. No, they just ask for an explanation. It's emotionally neutral. Being right is not emotionally neutral. Back to the dog and the chunk of meat on the table, baby. If you got to be right, you do it everywhere you go. Here's a new member actually, I think. I have a question. I was speaking with a coach, and she said, my question sounded like a Greg question. Does that mean for like really stupid people like myself? Thus my reason for writing you. I'm married now. I dog, cat, and house sat and worked overtime when I was dating my current spouse. Now that we're married, he's telling me that he really doesn't want me to do those things, as I have other obligations at home, like gardening, cleaning house, and so on. I'm afraid to back out of these obligations when they arise, or to stand up to my spouse and tell him that I feel I need to continue doing these things, though I'm not entirely sure of my reason for doing them now. Is it money? Is it socialization, I think? So, honey, you have to decide what you really want. Only you can do that. Do you really want to dog sit, cat sit, house sit? Do you really want to? And if so, why? Is it for money? Is it out of just habit? You've been doing it for years. Is it because you enjoy the social connections? Is it guilt about telling people no when you've said yes to them previously? All of these are very common reasons to do anything. And you have to be just painfully honest about this. Because if you lie about your reasons, you're going to be doomed about your decision. It's your reasons that matter more than the decision. Then you have to assess the cost-benefit ratio. Only you can put numbers to this. But again, you have to be honest. So not just about what you're afraid of or what you're used to. You got to be honest about what you're getting out of it and what it's costing you. So, for example, if you house sit, benefit, you get a little money, probably very little socialization. You're house sitting because they're not there, right? Cost, you'd be away from your husband. You are the only person who can determine the ratio of cost-benefit here. If you dog or cat sit, do you do that at the home of the owner or at your house? That matters. Benefit, you get some money, you get to play with the animals. Some people would do it free just to get to play with animals. Cost, again, time away from your husband and jobs that need to be done in a household. If you house sit or dog sit the animal at your house, then that always takes time and inconveniences whoever else is in the house. And then as you're deciding what you want, although I said that question first, you have to remember you're not just an individual anymore. Your decisions are not yours alone because they affect your partner. The right front wheel of the car can't just decide, I'm going to take that road while the other tires or other wheels go straight ahead, because they're a team, because they're partners. So the cost-benefit ratio isn't just yours. You have to talk to him about it and find out what the cost is to him and what are the benefits to him. You have to decide what you want and how much that affects him at the same time, because you're now in a partnership and it's very likely you haven't ever had to factor somebody in before. Then you jointly make a decision that you both like. Not just you make your decision and, well, tough beans to him. Based on what you get from sitting and what it costs both of you. And in the end, you're going to make it, even though you're going to do a cost-benefit analysis, you're going to do it by how you feel, how you both feel together, preferably. It's really a sweet thing to watch two people work out a potential problem, like the example that I gave earlier of Mary and whatever I made his name up to be, I don't remember now. The meditation porn, they worked it out. They were sensitive to what the other person needed, what they needed, and they solved it. Here's somebody who says, I was on Pete's conference call today, and I sent him the email below. I don't want anything back from him, which usually means, yes, we do. If people really don't need anything back from somebody, they don't usually need to say it. And I'm not saying that I know this. I'm just saying it's a sign. You continue. If my email is praising, would you be willing to tell me how I should have worded this so it was not praise? If my email is not praise, would you word it so that it is? I want to see the difference. I can't remember anybody ever asking me to if it's not praise, to make it praise. That's like saying, if I am being loving toward my partner, could you please show me how not to be? We don't usually need much help with that. And very few people don't speak in praise. We're used to trading. So it's not likely that you'll get this in unpraised language. But hey, let's see. As guiding principles, praise is an evaluation of a person. It's a positive evaluation or judgment of a person. Whereas not praise, which would be positive feedback, is simply information. So let's look at the email. Pete. In fact, it starts off with Dear Pete, which is already dangerously close to praising. Because if you know this person, dear usually becomes pretty unnecessary. I'm on your conference call, and I was on your conference call when you spoke to whoever, somebody, she didn't put the name. I am grateful for your courage. Okay? But people do a whole lot better if we're specific. So I'm grateful that you are courageous, is what you're saying. That's a positive evaluation of a person and would tend to be praise. So how could you make it more specific and just be information so that it's not praise? You could say, I am grateful that you have the courage to tell people the hard things, the things they might not like to hear. Hear the difference? The first one is an evaluation of him. I'm grateful for your courage. The second one is specific feedback about what he did. Grateful that he had the courage to what? You're not really giving him information. Then you continue. You are truly a wise man with her. The word truly puts it right over the court into the praise category. And this is an evaluation of him. It's an evaluation that he really doesn't need. Only he would be in a position to know if he was being genuine and loving with her, unless you have more experience than he does and can evaluate his function as a wise man. So, when you say you are truly a wise man with her, again, you asked to hear indications of praise. I'm not criticizing you or telling you should have done it differently. You are presuming to judge him. You're presuming you're in a position to even judge whether he is truly a wise man. How would you know? And you're telling him that he's doing a good job when you're not in a position to know that. So, yep, you're praising him. Definite praise here. So what could you say instead? probably nothing. You'd leave that sentence out. You already said that you were grateful for his courage, and I gave you an example about how to be more specific, that he was able to tell her the hard things that would be difficult to hear. That is information. This sentence wasn't needed at all. Then you said, thank you. There's a good point here, by the way, for all of us. We tend to praise all the time. We've been master traders from the time we were little kids, and almost invariably we use 10 times too many words. So far, I've rendered all of this in just one sentence. Then you said, thank you. Everything you said is right on. That's another evaluation. You're judging him positively, which is praise. For one thing, how would you know everything that he said is right on? Unless you are a more experienced wise person than he is, then what you're doing is you're grading him. You got a 98 on this. Unless you're really pretty good, you wouldn't be in a position to grade him at all. So what do you say? Again, nothing. You already said it with the courage part. Or you could say, if you wanted to just give him information, when you speak straight and lovingly at the same time, I am able to hear the messages that apply to me. There, that is information and not praise. And then you concluded with, I've never been happier in my life. Not really relevant to him. So you could say, if you want to avoid praise completely and have it be more congruent with the rest of your message, you're helping me move forward. See, specific. You are helping me move forward, not just you're doing a great job. There's no information there. In a journey that has led me to be happier than I've ever been. See, that is really useful information. Not a hint of criticism in all of this. We speak in trading language all the time. So unlearning that and learning how to be specific about behaviors and talk about ourselves and describe how somebody helped us, that's really quite a shift. Wonderful questions. Really enjoyed the live person who called in live. Adore your questions. Please continue to send them in, and if possible, we'll have you on as a live speaker, and we may go to that mostly, who knows. So find it, trust it, remember it, live it. It's all about love. We'll see you in a week.